rises, straw rustles round me, where slave he rises, shall of a man as coffee only, as nothing more, because today's bread ate he yesterday. Our thoughts so somber, our hearts so mournful, the time so hopeless, so full of dread, our fires fanning, the iron furnace, that twilight life, our spirits flameless out, our fires burning, the iron furnace, that twilight life, our spirits flameless out. That while alive, our spirits flame burst out.
As early as the fall of 1940, we established a quartet that sang well-known and popular songs. Our repertoire was not sophisticated, but in spite of that, as the days went by, the group of listeners became larger. Slowly but surely, it became a custom to invite us to other barracks for secretly organized evening events. Our performances were often rewarded with treats, which was not a negligible form of compensation, as those treats often came from other inmates' rations. Among the thousands of men who lived in our camps, there were all sorts of talents to be found. It wasn't long before other performers joined us in our evening events to gain a few moments of escape for themselves, while providing a means for their comrades in misery to also escape. These performance events were unforgettable experiences. Favorite literary passages often recited from memory, and of course there was much singing. Needless to say, these events had an insurmountable psychological effect on all of us because they helped us fight depression and overcome depression. And we all knew that depression, unattended to, brought inevitable death. Personally, I owe my life to those moments. I can honestly say that singing saved my life.
and these handcuffs to us. Oh, what is this prison to us? The strength of our spirits will conquer the tortures. The suffering cannot overpower us. When the door is rugged, the men are upon, my strength is a dangerous foe. We'll not spare our lives, no, we'll not spare our blood, to raise Poland up from her grave. We'll not spare our lives, no, we'll not spare our blood, to raise Poland up from her grave. To win or die, to win or die.
So many have withered in dark cells for us. So many have died for us.
To win or die,
To win or to die. No one else have we left. Will not let them run over us.
win or die.
When we are robbed in the flame of my strength is a dangerous foe. Will not spare our lives, no, will not spare our blood, to raise Poland up from the grave. Will not spare our lives, no, will not spare our blood, to raise Poland up from the grave. To raise Poland up from her grave.
Hurrah! Ho!
On July 19th, 1943, 12 prisoners were hanged at the roll call square of our concentration camp. The camp commandant decided to conduct the execution of these prisoners as a deterrent. I was one of the eyewitnesses, one of those who stood closest to what went on. They built the gallows in front of the camp kitchens where I worked at the time. It was constructed of wood and an iron crossbeam from which 12 halters were hung. It was a terrifying sight. The news of the imminent deaths spread throughout the camp. A detachment of SS soldiers gathered behind the gallows, and up in the watchtowers, the number of guards had been doubled. Before the orchestra could play its first march, the SS men surrounded the gallows. As the 30,000 prisoners stood at the roll call square in total silence, the procession of the 12 began. They ascended the gallows barefoot, clothed only in denim. Their hands were tied with wire as they stepped up on their stools and, one by one, faced the motionless columns of prisoners whom they could now see through the ovals of their halters. Then they put the nooses around their necks. As the commandant began reading the sentencing decree, a startling thing occurred. Without waiting for the reading to end, a youngster known throughout the camp as Kaminsky's brother kicked the stool on which he was standing with as much strength as he could gather and hanged himself. The commandant became silent for a moment, and then the SS soldiers, even though no command had been issued, ran up to the remaining 11 and pulled the stools from under them before they too could commit one final act of resistance.
rocks that surround me, of cold skies that mock, deride my soul. Then my soul beckons to my country, sings a suffering from the fire's heart, remembering all those prisoners of torment, dreaming in a world of wise and bars. In Buchenwald.
On September 1st, 1939, German forces invaded Poland. The Nazi regime had classified Poles as subhumans and had adopted a policy committed to the destruction and deportation of all Polish citizens. On the eve of the invasion, Hitler held a meeting with his high officials. I have placed my death head formations in readiness with orders to send to death mercilessly and without compassion men, women, and children of Polish derivation and language. Only thus shall we gain living space that we need. During the invasion, Hitler deployed special action squads that concentrated on eliminating any form of Polish resistance. In addition to his genocidal policy, which had targeted all of Poland's 3.3 million Jews, he required that any Polish citizen considered capable of emerging as a leader in resisting the German occupation of Poland also be eliminated. This group of condemned Poles became known as the Polish intelligentsia and was comprised largely of wealthy landowners, government officials, university professors, doctors, teachers, priests, and journalists. Poles may have only one master. Two masters cannot exist side by side, and this is why all members of the Polish intelligentsia must be killed. Tens of thousands of intelligentsia were murdered in mass executions or sent to prisons or concentration camps. Another Nazi policy aimed at weakening resistance efforts was that of separating family members from one another. Separation instilled fear and effectively demoralized Poles, weakening their resolve to resist. Between 1939 and 1945, at least 1.5 million Polish citizens were separated from their families and transported to the Reich to perform forced labor. Many were teenaged boys and girls.
It was 1942, and I was 18 years old. The Nazis came to our home to take me away, but I was not there. When I returned home, my mother quickly dressed me as an old woman and took me to the country, where she hid me in the attic of a family I did not even know. 3 days later, my mother received an official letter from the mayor of our town. It stated, if I did not appear, my family would be evacuated from the town and shot. My mother came to where I was hiding and showed me the letter, begging me not to go, but I knew what I must do. There were 19 other teenage girls from our town on the military bus that took us to a nearby camp where we were examined by German doctors. Once we were declared healthy, SS soldiers escorted us to a waiting train where we were crammed into a cattle car. Then, with a clanging jolt, the train began to roll away, taking us from all that we loved dearly to our new destination, Germany.
Already rolling, puffing and blowing, already hearing the clatter taking her away. Eyes last meet gazing, hands gesture waving, unspoken silent sorrow. Running still beside the train in full futility. Farewell, my love, remember me. Goodbye to eyes that once caressed me. Farewell to love that owned my heart. The dark hours In the camp, songs accompanied a person from birth until death. It was 1942, and I had just been delegated to the Women's Hospital in Brzezinka. I remember it well because 6 children were born in the camp hospital on that day, and their story still burns bright in my memory. 6 women had come in on the transport from Lublin, and all 6 were in the late stages of their pregnancies. After the births of their newborns, each mother tried to have her child with her for at least a moment to feel what it was like to be a mother and to bond with her child in a time of such misery. Each woman believed that because she was allowed to give birth to her child would be allowed to live. Because there were various nationalities at the block, each mother sang to her own child in her own native tongue. Many times they sang sentimental lullabies, which perhaps they had sung to other children before. They sang songs next to the cradles just like any other woman in the world. That was during the day. At night, I returned to the men's camp. One morning, upon arriving at the hospital, I learned that the 6 children had been needled. Needled was the slang term that we used to describe the fatal, poisonous shot administered through a long needle into the heart. The women also received the deadly shot.
Their clothes veil the bride that now slumbers inside. The boats on their feet murmur sighs. Their brothers and sisters, their husbands and wives, the striped ones, the prisoners marked with stripes. Their brothers and sisters, their husbands and wives, the striped ones, the prisoners marked with stripes. The watchtowers and sentinels and gates that cut off the world from their sight cannot quell the heart that so patiently waits for freedom to find its way inside. Cannot quell the heart that so patiently waits for freedom to find its way inside. Its way inside. This time is the time when the day lives in night, when fate knows no tender plight. Let nothing divide us, let all here unite, for we are the women marked with stripes. Let nothing divide us, let all here unite, for we are the women marked with stripes. The women marked with stripes. The women marked with stripes. With stripes.
The pump station served as a place of meaning for us. During these meetings, we could live it up, culturally and intellectually, isolated away from everyday life. It was a hiding place. On several occasions, we managed to arrange to have some alcohol there. Transports of prisoners from Hungary began to arrive, and barrels of Tokay were transported on the same trains. My fellow inmates and I stored these barrels aside, officially stating that the barrels contained vinegar. One heroic colleague managed to smuggle himself into the storage house where the alleged vinegar was held. He and a small group of comrades, using a system of irrigation pipes linked together by pieces of rubber and tape, managed to siphon the wine into vessels over 10 meters away at the pump station. One day when we were all excited and under the influence of alcohol, which, by the way, did not take long to influence us, we gathered at the pump station and the following lyrics were born. There's something inside us that's happening again. We're beginning to feel like we're someone again. With a glass in one hand and a bottle in the other, our spirits rise up to the music of brothers. Let the flavor of wine spread around. Hey, there's no life like life at Auschwitz. War doesn't bother us. No, not in our cellar, where Tokay abounds, as does trust for each other. Let the flavor of wine spread around. Hey, there's no life like life at Auschwitz.
I miss you, and I worry about you as I wait for your letters. Let the tender words of our farewell moment soothe your pain, because when your hand caressed my temple, all sorrow and grief went away. Let your pain, O mother, be rewarded, and let the tears be kissed away from your eyes. I miss your caress and your sweet words so much that a bitter tear of yearning trembles in my eyes again. O mother, I would like so much to be a child again, like years before, and hide again in your arms. After you kissed me farewell on my forehead, I faced a horribly evil world, far away from you. Day after day passes, and I only know one thing, that I must return because I want to reward your pain, O mother, and kiss the tears away from your eyes.